We're live again. We're back. We're going to do this a couple times a week. To everyone listening, I was getting tired, to be honest with you, doing it every single night. I'm going to keep doing it, but I was getting worn out because everything else I have to keep doing. I have on today the lovely, the wonderful, the talented, the smart, the committed, Sandy Chelnov. Sandy, are you there?
I am.
Oh, good.
Hi,
I
Nate.
don't see you yet.
Can you see me?
How are you? No, not really.
No.
Oh, I see you. Wait, I see you. I got you.
Okay.
So Sandy, tell the people at home who you are. You're the brief introduction. She is the chair of the town of Holland, right?
Democratic Committee.
Yes, right. The Democratic Committee chair. Isn't that the official title?
Pretty much. The
How do you like
Democratic Committee?
What's the town of Holland like for those who don't know?
Well, it's a large town in that it covers a lot of geographic distance, but it doesn't really have a core village. It has a hamlet, which is unincorporated. So it's pretty spread out, and it's southeast of Buffalo, about 12 minutes south of, by car, of course, of East Aurora.
So like a lot of towns in upstate New York, it's named after a place in Europe or an international city. So we have Medina instead of Medina. We have Chile. We have instead of Chile, we have Lima instead of Lima. But Holland isn't Holland or something. It's Holland.
No, it's Holland.
Yeah, and it's a beautiful place, and your home is quite beautiful, I have to say. It's very lovely. And what would you describe the environment like? It's very...
Well, it's in a valley,
right,
with Cazenovia Creek running through it. In fact, Cazenovia Creek is right in my backyard. When I moved here about 16 years ago, I told my now husband that he asked me, where do I want to live? Anywhere in Western New York. And I said, well, I don't want to live in the suburbs. I could live in the city. Let's try the country. All I really need is a creek in my backyard. And so
you got it. It's a special creek. Can you tell the folks at home why it's so special?
Well, there are lots of reasons. Do you have one in particular?
Well, it's a major environmental, the major tributary in the southern part of our district, and it's known for its environmental properties. I mean, it's a very, very important environmental resource for the region.
Well, this is also the East Branch. It's got two branches that come together right outside of East Aurora. So, and there's quite a bit of shale, actually, flat shale in the creek. This part of the creek never goes completely dry in the summer. There's always at least a trickle, but in the winter and the spring,
it's gushing.
It's a torrent.
It's downright dangerous.
Yeah. And it's definitely quite a bit of erosion going on too.
Let me ask you this.
Mm-hmm.
You have quite an incredible story. Can I talk about that? Let's talk about where you grew up. Am I wrong? You grew up in Japan.
I had 2 years in Japan.
But you were in Japan. You were in Europe. Where were you in Europe? You were in Scandinavia, maybe?
I was born in France. Hold on, we have a kitten here who is eating paper. Come on.
Oh, I see your husband back there.
Yes, he's trying to.
So you were born in...
Yeah, I was born in France. I like to say that's where my parents decided to settle. And I was there until the age of almost 5. And my dad was at that point had an import-export business after World War II, and unfortunately went bankrupt. And so we came back to the States, and we traveled a lot around, and had a pretty challenging time because my dad was actually a naturalized citizen at that point and a Russian immigrant. But he had a very good education. There was a Jesuit education in Belgium, and yeah, there's the cat again. She really wants to be on camera, but she's not going to get there. Anyway, so
what was he importing and exporting?
I don't know at that point what he was doing. I know that the reason he went bankrupt had to do with his partner wanting to, they bought a factory that was, to make a transition to peacetime manufacturing, and it didn't make it. So.
Oh, I see. So he wanted to. Okay, so he was all over Europe then. You were all over Europe.
The factory was actually in the States that they bought.
Well, how the heck did you get to Japan? What was that all about?
That was much later.
Okay, all right.
Later. We got back. We came back to the States, and my dad had a very hard time getting a good job. My mother went to work and pretty much supported the family for a while. And finally, he did get a job through my mother's family's contacts, because the other thing, besides being a naturalized citizen, he didn't have a college education, even though he had a very good Jesuit education. And a relative who was high up in the Encyclopedia Britannica got wind of my dad and the fact that he spoke 5 languages, even though he didn't have a college education, and decided wanted to interview him and hired him to be general manager for Europe.
Wow.
So
he's a very intelligent man. And so what's your connection to Western New York then?
My husband.
Oh, okay. So where did you guys meet? Can I ask on camera? I'm sorry. And I love, by the way, I love your husband. He's there. He's also an intelligent,
we met in college.
Wonderful person. Got it.
We met at the freshman mixer.
Where was this?
At Columbia University.
Oh my goodness.
And I remember it was kind of a joke between us, because when you started off your campaign and you were trying to get folks a little roused up, and you'd say, remember 1968? I guess we had a somewhat older crowd, which we were part of. And we kind of looked at each other and kind of laughed, because that's when we met, in the fall of 1968.
What was 1968 like? What was it like? Was it like, I wasn't born. I'm sorry. Don't take it the wrong way. I don't know. All I know is from documentary.
I know that. Well, it was, we were in the middle of, actually, we started college right after, it was after the big student strike in the spring of 1968 at Columbia. So we were the next generation. We were rebel rousers back then.
Did it feel more uneasy then or now? Because, I walk around, I feel it's never been like this in my lifetime. But I know watching the convention footage or the riot footage from this 1968, it seems like America was pretty unsettled. I mean, how can you compare the eras, or can you?
I don't know. I think it's a lot more now than it was then. Now, I actually went back to Europe, and so I graduated from high school in Switzerland where my parents were living. My dad was there, and there was a big student strike in May of 1968 in France that then the students got together with the workers and there was a general strike. So that was and then right around that time was when Martin Luther King was assassinated, and I was still in Europe at the time. So it was RFK's later. Martin Luther King was.
So you're overseas in Europe when all those things happened, and
yeah.
Can you speak to the moment we're in right now? Like, I tell the guys on my team, like, they're like 10 years younger than me, and I'll say to them, or more, but they're at least a generation younger than me, and I'll say to them, look, this is unlike anything I've ever seen in our history. I mean, I remember George Bush, and I remember when he started screwing up, and Republicans started to say, this guy's got to go. I mean, not the same way the Democrats did, but there was a consensus that George Bush wasn't good. Or I remember there was always partisanship in America, but never the type of partisanship we see today where, I mean, anyone with eyes could see that Trump is lying, and yet the Republicans will not recognize the lies. They just ignore it. And I also never remember this type of instability, just overall. I mean, obviously we have the COVID situation, but it's much bigger than that. Am I wrong to say that? I mean, it seems like it's an urgent era. It's an emergency. Is my perspective off?
No, I think this is a big deal. I mean, right. We have the pandemic on top of, I mean, to me, the pandemic in part feels like Mother Nature just giving us a huge wake-up call, and a very painful one. But we're also being given the opportunity to stop and think and reflect and hopefully make some changes.
Right.
So,
well,
I mean,
you've been making changes in Holland. I mean, you've been. Did you ever think you'd be the chair of the committee out there? I mean, how did that all happen? No. I know you worked on my campaign, and I know you were active in causes locally, but now you're a leader, and you have a group of people that are with you. And I should say, not just in Holland, and it's not exclusively women, but it'd be wrong for me not to recognize the fact that many of these rural communities are majority women. And I say that's pretty impressive because they're the ones putting in the time and the courage to lead. But you're one of those leaders, and can you talk about how that happened and how it came to pass?
Well, let's see. I was a climate activist for a number of years after moving here to Western New York, and but after 2016, I felt a real urgency to commit myself more to political work, electoral work, and I also connected with a number of women online who were, kind of coming out of the woodwork. And, some of them were my age, many of them were younger. And I think we all considered ourselves to be great support to one another. And everyone seemed to be really wanting to get engaged. And that's for me has been something I've been waiting to, in a way, see happen here in Western New York ever since I moved here. Now, I cut my political teeth, such as they are, in the San Francisco Bay Area, where I lived for 30 years before I was here.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, and I found
Where in San Francisco?
Oakland and Berkeley, mostly Oakland.
Okay.
And
I went to law school out there. You know that, right?
Yes. Yes,
I
you're
know
on San Francisco.
I would say to people listening, I hate to say this but it is incredibly beautiful. I think Western New York is beautiful, and I think the second place that's closest to my heart would have to be the Bay Area, because I mean, if you see the Marin Headlands and if you see the Golden Gate Bridge and sunset, it's hard to imagine. It's pretty
Hmm.
beautiful. I just
Yes.
wanted to say that I think about it often. So anyway, keep going. I know you're out there, but
It's
we'll have to
it's
talk about it
it's
sometime.
it's not it's not quite what it used to be. It's a lot more crowded.
It's
Um,
packed. Yeah, it's
yeah,
packed.
yeah, yeah. And that's
So
something.
you were an activist out there?
Yeah, and I
Wow.
mean, on that little form that I was given to fill out, I did mention that um, I in the mid 80s, I managed as a campaign for city council in Berkeley. It was really a friend of mine who snagged me and said, do this for me. And I did
Did she
it.
win or did he
She
win?
won. She won. And she's now the Democratic whip in
You're
the
kidding.
California State Senate. That's right.
Man,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
great.
She was the graduate school. She was a graduate student when she won the election.
Wow.
So, so that was, but I did it. And I remember the mayor telling me, oh, Sandy, wow, this is great. You could really have a career in this. And I sort of went, no, I don't think so. I love canvassing. I love a lot of about campaigns,
It's fun.
but the managing of it, I'll leave it to somebody else.
But you've been an incredible on the ground manager for us. I listen, when I ran in 2018, there's a few people that stood out, and you were one of them. And I said, if I run again, and I wanted to right away, because when we were so close, um, I realized we could win, and I realized that going to go to jail. And I was like, look, I don't care if he won, he's not going to be there very long. We need to get ready. And I immediately reached out to you because you were such a committed person the first time around. Shame on me. I didn't know you had all this experience. I just thought you were like this dynamic person who was just really into it. So you came back to Western New York and you got involved in you started to say, listen, it's about
I
time. I
was
want to be involved in
mostly
politics again.
around climate. I did also join the League of Women Voters, and actually quite a bit of my environmental work I did through the League because I recognized that the League had um, a lot of respect within political circles that was not really given to environmental groups, unfortunately. Uh, and I did that, and then I went on to be a founder of it was actually a group of women from the League in East Aurora and myself. We founded an organization called ACES, called Aurorans for Climate and Environmental Sense. And it's quite amazing. It's been quite a few years, but it's um,
Still active.
the imagination of quite a few people in the village. So that's cool. That's very
But
nice.
now you're running a committee. That's a big jump because it's a lot of work. It's about pushing out candidates, about putting out petitions. It's the nitty gritty of politics. It's not just going
It's
to a
nitty-gritty.
protest or. Yeah,
What's interesting about it is that uh, there are only 6 of us because there are not that many Democrats in Holland. Interestingly, there are 500 and something Democrats and 500 and something blanks, people who have no party affiliation.
Don't
And
you
then
think?
about
Yeah,
700 and something who are Republicans.
I think that more than ever, a lot of people do not want to be associated with either party because,
Mhm.
right or wrong, they feel the Democratic Party has let them down, and they don't see any hope in the Republican Party either. I see that all the time. Do you agree with that or no?
I could stipulate that. I don't know that for a fact. I know that the young ones I mean, I saw this earlier on in California, that people who were younger folks, when they were registering to vote, registered, with no affiliation,
Well,
So,
beyond that, I gotta say, and this is shame on me and anyone younger than me or my age, young people talk a lot, but I wish we could get them more involved in actually doing. It is like if it's pulling teeth sometimes to get young people out to meetings. True or false? And not just this meeting, like service organizations of all types. And I'm not trying to diss them, but I think when you're young, your priorities are different. And when you get older, you say, look at this, this is more important. And it's not just something to talk about online, it's something I have to commit time to.
yeah.
I mean, I'm not just speculating here. Statistically, we also know this is the case.
Right.
Older people vote, older people are involved, older people put money into it. Why do you think that is?
I'd like to think that that's starting to change, because both because of the climate situation, as well as the issue around guns and gun violence. I mean, it's kids have to deal with that. The way I had to deal with ducking under the cafeteria table in elementary school because the Russians might come.
I agree with you. I mean, I think this is one of the things that I kind of am in that gap generation. So I remember the fear of nuclear annihilation.
Right.
And by the way, which I still think is a major, 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 major issue that gets short shrift in the modern age. I mean, we are on the edge of nuclear annihilation, and it's almost like it's almost too uncomfortable to talk about. But I still think is a major priority is the elimination of nuclear weapons, for me anyway. Especially, I grew up under fear of a nuclear attack all the time, and the danger hasn't lessened. We just don't talk about it anymore. But to your other point about guns and about violence, and just in general about being a Democrat in rural New York, which there's more of us than people think. Correct? True or false?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, I always tell people that you're definitely not alone, and if you make your voice heard, you'll be a magnet, and other people will come to help. Do you see that or no?
We're working on it. Of course, the pandemic makes it more difficult. I had in the last few days that I was able to do some canvassing before, we couldn't anymore. I guess that was one day was the last day I was petitioning, carrying around petitions, and I was just going up and down my street. What I noticed was that the women, I had women on my list who actually did change their affiliation to Democrat, and from I don't know what before. I had a Republican. Well, I went to one door where there was a 20-year-old registered as a Democrat. I mean, this is all anecdotal, but
Right, no, but you see
experience.
You're not the only one who said that. There's people that told me multiple times, people that were Republicans a year ago, they'll go to their door now and now are Republicans, Democrats.
Democrats.
Right?
So this situation was interesting because I was looking for the 20-year-old, and it was an older woman who came to the door, and I had your flyer, and I had absentee ballot application. And so she kind of looked at your campaign literature. She didn't make a face. She was not on my list. So I knew she was not a Democrat, right? I didn't know what she was, but she did not make a face. She just took it in. And then I said, and this is an absentee ballot. Oh, okay. Yes. And she was just on the phone with her son. And then I said, well, would you like one? She said, well, I'm not a Democrat. And I said, well, I don't get a sense that I quite how I didn't want to assume that she would vote for you, but I said, I get the sense that you're open to voting for Nate McMurray. And she said to me, well, I'm certainly not going to vote for the other guy. She said, "He who wants to build the wall? I mean, we've got other fish to fry." And
I think that guy's done major damage to himself with that commercial, by the way.
yeah,
I mean, long term, I mean, I don't know what he's thinking to run that commercial in the middle of a pandemic. I mean, I find it shocking.
it's shocking that he's still running it.
I know he has a lot of very, very high paid consultants. I can't believe these consultants are not telling him I think we need to pull this commercial. I don't know what they're doing. I mean,
I'm surprised that he hasn't.
Let's pretend that commercial is effective for a second. Let's pretend. Is there any ethics or just common decency to say, like, we should not be running this right now? I find it fascinating. I mean, millions of dollars spent on that commercial in the middle of he should have donated that $1 million to ventilators.
Right.
I mean, goodness gracious. Let me ask you this. So you're on the committee now. You're actively involved in the committee. You have this incredible background. 50% I knew about. 50% I didn't know about. Sorry, Sandy. I wish I knew all of that. Where do we go from here? How do we win? How do we fight for the things we care about? How do we win this election that you're involved in right now with me? What do we got to do? What are you doing? And tell me how things have changed since
I was,
COVID.
I was a little, we were kind of hit with a, what do I call it? We had a narrow miss, let's put it this way, in our household, right? We had a.
Are you okay talking about that?
Yeah, I am, but it's luckily my husband tested positive after a trip, and luckily it was not a very intense case, let's put it that way. And because he had been in contact with someone who had been very sick and who had tested positive, the county at that time had tests. So he was tested, and then they turned around right away and said, you got to get yourself tested. And it took 6 days. And our daughter, who lives right next door, had to be tested. But by that time, he was already.
She's negative too?
She's all negative. Everybody that he came into contact with for any period of time at all after he returned came out negative. So
I'll tell you what, when I heard the news, I am a spiritual person. I prayed. I know that it doesn't change anything, but it's not substantial help to you. I should say that at the very least. But man, I prayed just as much when I found out everyone was okay. Because I was worried, Sandy. Because that was the first person we found out was positive,
right?
And we didn't know much about COVID at all yet. We knew enough that it was dangerous, and you handled it with grace, I'll tell you, and courage. And I'm grateful for the way both you and your husband handled it.
Well, we were lucky. We were lucky. I mean, I was taking all sorts of, me, this about me, oh, let's see, what kind of medicinal mushrooms can we take, and how much vitamin D can I get away with, and all of that. So
I mean, it was so scary, Sandy, when I first heard it. I just didn't want anything to happen because we've become pretty close, and it was almost like hard to face head on for me because I was like, but this is going to sound strange, but I'm glad you got through it. Yeah. It gives me hope that others can get through it because more of us are going to catch this, right?
Right. Although, yeah, and it's hard to know what, I did what I thought would be helpful, and who knows, who knows. I knew I had to be strong and get my immune system strong and get a lot of sleep. Anytime I felt tired, I just stop and take a nap.
Right.
It's really important.
I wish we saw each other almost every day for a while. It's kind of miserable that we can't get together as a team anymore. And
And
you were
this is
part of
by
our team.
far the
We
longest
saw each other.
conversation we've ever had.
Usually it's like, hey, you gotta go there and do this. Or you're telling me, hey, you did this wrong. I mean, we don't. I mean, I'm glad to have this opportunity to talk to you.
I remember the first time I talked with you was it was a small house party in Orchard Park, and I don't know, there were maybe 20 people there, and you asked us all what was important to us, and you responded to everything, and at the end you said, listen folks, I need to tell you I'm going to have to go negative, because this guy Chris Collins is a crook, and I'm going to have to go negative. And I remember going, oh my God, so I can't, but you were definitely approachable, because I went up and tapped you on the shoulder and said, excuse me, could I say something to you? And you said, of course.
I don't remember this. Go ahead.
And I said, well, I understand that this guy's a crook, and I understand that we've got to tell it like it is, but don't go negative for the sake of going negative. We have to stand up for the values. I didn't know you from Adam, right? I mean, and you said, yes, I heard you, and you're not the first one to say that. so that's good.
Well, listen, let me tell you why I would say that. Because our side is like, I believe Michelle Obama. When they go high, or when they go low, we go high, or whatever he said. What was her exact phrase? I always scream. When they go low, we go high. We don't want to go too high, though. That's my problem. I think sometimes I go to these events and I'm like, I'll give you an example. The Jacobs commercial. I said to someone that I know and I'm very close with, that you know as well. I don't want to use their name on here, but I said, yeah, that commercial is completely racist. And they said, well, you can't say that. I said, why not? It's racist. Do you think it's racist? And she said, absolutely, it's racist. And then I'm like, well, then we have to identify it as racist. But I think our side, I mean, the people we work with, we're all good people. I mean, overly good. These are people that make pies for each other and give each other, medicinal mushroom recipes and whatever. These are good people. And like, we don't want to fight. We want to fix problems and
you're fading out
each other. But there are times where you have to say, "Oh, you there? Am I there now? You there? Can you hear me now?"
Yeah. You were getting a little muffled there.
Oh, sorry. I was just saying there's times where we have to say this is bad, and we have to identify it as bad. Now, we don't have to be, and if you notice, have I ever really gone to mean? I get a little chippy, but I don't go to the places, like I won't call her, but I think it's to fight like hell. I think it's important. I think our side has to learn to fight. We have to be noble about it, but it's not about being dirty and mudslinging. It's about saying this is really wrong. Because if you don't say something's wrong, then that's the issue. Is that fair?
Yes.
And are we still having the same argument we had in North?
No. Then that wasn't really an argument. It was a clarification. Okay. It was a clarification, because I did say I really feel we have to stand for our values. So if we take a position that's based on our values, and that's done clearly, then we're coming from a real position of strength.
Well, I've evolved a lot as a person, I would say, and as a cat. When I first started, I just said, we need someone to punch Collins. We need someone to stand up to him, and we think you're tough enough to do it. So I kind of felt that was my role and is to be a tough guy, to show Collins. Because no one thought we had a chance. And I thought, well, if I'm gonna lose, I might as well stand for something and be. But our district, I started to learn the issues that people are facing, and now it's not just about standing against somebody, it's standing for something. So I've definitely evolved as a person, as a candidate, I'll tell you that. I mean, I got a long way to go, Sandy. You know that better than anybody. You've seen me behind the scenes.
Right.
So Sandy, I love you. You're a great person. I have nothing but respect for you. I love being around you and your husband. and just and everybody does. The story, the articles, they're a ton of love. And I love the fact you introduced me to some very intellectually stimulating people in our region. You know what I'm talking about, right?
Do I?
Mr. Schultz.
Ah, okay.
Among others. So I encourage you to continue to share stuff with me. If I don't respond right away, I'm terrible. I'm just, but I always read what you send me. Is there anything else you want to share with the group?
Just that, I would love to talk more, and maybe even have more kind of grassroots folks, and have the discussion about what this campaign's going to look like going forward. And well, I'm fascinated to hear more from you. I know that you're very able to talk to anyone and to really listen, and that's key in terms of organizing and reaching out and connecting. And I suppose we have a big challenge here, because you can't do that right now, right? In the same way.
No, I'll tell you what, our greatest strength was the ability to go meet people, have rallies. That's what we're really good at.
Right.
And I'm not going to lie that it hurts us that we can't do that. So I like going and see the other side too. I loved it. I love going to a gun club and having a conversation. I think the more we talk, the more we win. But we can't do that. We can't do that right now. So you're right. It is aggravating. So we have to continue to discuss ways to get out to meet people and to spread the word and talk about the issue. I don't have the answers yet. I think everybody's learning this right now, including Joe Biden. If you look at what he's doing, it's not as effective as having a. All right. Well, listen. I asked you in Orchard Park, what's the most important to you? Is it still climate change?
Climate change, but also our democracy, and what does it, how to heal it. That's really, I sent you long ago I remembered the other day a quote that I'll read again.
Which one? Okay, let's hear it.
Okay, it says, "The human heart is the first home of democracy. It is where we embrace our questions. Can we be equitable? Can we be generous? Can we listen with our whole beings, not just our minds, and offer our attention rather than our opinions? And do we have enough resolve in our hearts to act courageously, relentlessly, without giving up, ever trusting our fellow citizens to join with us in our determined pursuit of a living democracy?" That's Terry Tempest.
Who wrote that?
Terry Tempest Williams.
I should probably, in my defense,